Hello, I'm Christian. I'm a German psychologist and deal with the history of autism in these sessions on YouTube. This is my third session. Whether someone was right or wrong usually only become apparent in the future. From today's perspective, Kenner was wrong on 3 points. Point 1. Kenner's diagnostic criteria were too narrow. A number of children who would have been diagnosed as autistic today did not receive a clear diagnosis from him. Point 2. Kenner considered autism to be a unique disorder, a separate diagnosis for many years. However, in the 50s, he himself speculated, like so many other physicians before him, that autism could be a form of schizophrenia. Point 3. Although Kenner maintained contact with his first autism patients and was also received as supportive by the parents, he later joined the zeitgeist and considered unloving and rigid parenting behavior to be a possible cause of autism. Point 1. After Kenner had published his authoritative article, word had spread throughout the USA that at the Harry Lane Hospital in Baltimore, Kenner examined developmentally disturbed children and gave an assessment whether these children had autism or not. Kenner was very strict about the 6 features he attributed to autism. He later said himself he regarded 9 out of 10 children as non-autistic. When one considers that these children from a large radius around Baltimore were sent specifically to him for diagnosis, this is only a very small percentage. The first prevalence studies from the 60s conducted in England initially proved him right. Lotter, in 1966, found a rate of 4.5 children per 10,000 in Middle Essex, and as recently as 1979, Wing and Gold have found a slightly increased prevalence rate of nearly 5 to 10,000. Today, the diagnostic criteria are no longer interpreted so strictly. Autism is recognized as a very diverse developmental disorder in the field of social communication. Today, we assume a frequency of a good 1%. That means 1 person in 100 people has an autistic disorder. 2. Kenner initially regarded autism to be a congenital disorder in the area of affective contact. He wrote, "We must then assume that these children have come into the world with innate inability to form the usual biologically provided affective contact with people, just as other children come into the world with innate physical or intellectual handicaps." Kenner thus suspected that something that did not become generally accepted among experts until the 17th, that autistic children develop differently from other children and that autism is therefore actually different from other psychic difficulties that can arise in the course of childhood and adolescence. The most important serious mental disorder at that time was schizophrenia. Today it is no longer. Depression and autism have long since overtaken schizophrenia. Then, as now, clinical researchers were puzzled by the possible causes and influencing factors of schizophrenia. A number of physicians saw at that time the developmental abnormalities of autistic children as the first signs and precursors of schizophrenia. Just like schizophrenic patients, autistic children seem to have difficulties in relating to reality. These symptoms initially led scientists to suspect that autism was a very early form of schizophrenia. Therefore, the World Health Organization classified autism close to the psychosis in 1979, in the 9th edition, which means close to schizophrenia. This erroneous assumption was corrected in the 10th edition of the International Classification of Diseases in 1992. It was given a new designed subcategory within the disorders of psychological development, number F84, pervasive developmental disorders, the most prominent of which are autistic disorders. 3. When Kenner wrote his well-known article in 1943, he had come to the conclusion that autism has a neurological cause, in line with current professional opinion. In the 50s, however, his views gradually changed. The decade of psychoanalysis dawned as in Germany the Nazis had come to power. Many doctors immigrated to America from Central Europe, bringing with them the ideas of Sigmund Freud and Carl Gustav Jung, according to which any form of mental disorder could be caused by experiences of or events from early childhood. Since Kenner had attempted to gather the knowledge of his time in his book Child Psychiatry, which was that thick, he had an eclectic approach, so he couldn't help being influenced by the climate of his times, which led him to his most painful error. He got more and more unclear to whether the disorder was genetic, environmental, or both. Especially the special interests of some children seem to be emanating from the interests of the mothers. If, as in his well-known first case, Donald Triplett, the mother and her son learns dull verbal verses, the 25 questions and answers of Prosperitan Catechism, for example, which Donald really wanted to learn. This kind of parenting behavior seemed cold and unloving to Kenner, so he began to wonder whether it wasn't the unresponsive mother that was responsible for her unresponsive child.